All right, thank you, LCD Sound System. The best song I could think of to accompany this stream, Kevin Grace will join us in about 9 minutes. I'll send over the invite. You know, I like to come in and warm up the crowd, like before a talk show. When I do these, I don't know why, but the good Kevin Grace has consented to come in and chat with us, and we're going to ask him mostly about Canada, but whatever he wants to talk about, of course. But yeah, I do like. Last week we had Jonathan Paul. This week we have Kevin. We're kind of working through our friends. Maybe we can find people we don't know to come in here. If we could just get some people to watch, then people will submit to it. That will want to come on, perhaps. Yeah, and that's what we're going to do mostly. Get people in here to provide us with some content and insight about things that are going on out there. Yeah, because it doesn't work where I come in here and just try and ramble on. Hi, Art Bell. Good to see you. Good questions. We'll ask Kevin about this stuff. Yeah. I know why you always tell me on JF. I find JF unwatchable because of the Pink Panther accent. I half expect him to start doing this broad humor. But I guess he's good. Nothing against anybody. I have no friends, no enemies here. We are untethered. We are not all by ourselves here. Our views represent only our own. Our minds are never made up, and we're just here. We're just here bearing witness. That's the model here. Other people are going to have ideas, and other people want to organize. Other people think they have all the answers. God bless them. Maybe they're right. I'm open to it. But me, I'm just bearing witness as a lowly human being on this spinning blue orb. Yeah. Art Bell has some good points about Canada that I did not think of. All I could think of, Art, maybe you remember if you're watching, whoever's watching, one of the two of you, may remember there was some beef going on in Canada between factions of Indian factions or some foreign factions that were beefing it out in Canada. I didn't have time to go properly find that. If anybody remembers what it was, just tell me so I don't have to ask Kevin in that vague way. Wasn't there some beef with Pajeets going at it in Canada? But I'm sure he remembers. Art Bell continues his obsession with the Beach Boys. Who does KMG like? Beach Boys versus the Beatles, I'm guessing. No, I think KMG is not really a Beatles guy. I've heard it said recently, somebody averred that the Beach Boys are actually way better than the Beatles. They could be. Beach Boys are underappreciated now because, they sort of lost out to black music. It really was sort of like they were the best white pop band out there. And they just kind of got swallowed up. I mean, hardly swallowed up. They're huge, and you remember them and everything. But they could have dominated pop music. But for the fact that, it kind of went into the Motown pop soul direction, instead of in the Beach Boys harmonies direction. But when I was a kid, it was Surfing USA. Surfing USA was a massive album. Of course, we were in Southern California, too. Yeah, JF did something on J.D. Vance's sneaky anti-migrant EU speech. I don't know if it was all that sneaky. I thought it was quite bold. He just went in there and told them, how it is. I loved it. I love that we have, I don't trust Vance. I don't trust Trump. I'm practically anti-Trump at this point with all this madness. And even the good things that are happening aren't as good as people think. People are just so excited. It appears revolutionary. Still not that much has happened. And again, we can count on Donald Trump honoring the wishes of his donors and the elites and throwing us aside. That's the sure bet. And the long, long, long shot is that he will betray the elites and favor us. Because politics is about who gets betrayed. That's all it is. Who gets betrayed? Somebody gets tossed aside. And for all his talk, for all his instinct, Trump still is an elite. He's still an aspirational elite. He still wants above all. He luxuriates in the love he gets from crowds, but he still wants above all to be honored by his fellow elites, and he's still one of them. You never really leave the elite ranks. Class is always there. Let's get our invite ready. There's an invite. Copy that invite, Dennis. Thank you. Let's go on over to X. Look for Kevin Grace. We're going to send him an invite. And get your questions ready for our expert Canadian. I do know one thing, that I have no time for the more exotic conspiracy theories right now. A friend of mine is trying to get me into UAV, UFO stuff, and I find it somehow so non-compelling, so uninteresting. For one thing, I don't think that. Hi, Kevin. Here, I'm sending you, if you're watching, I'm sending the invite now. I just opened a little early to play a song, etc. Yeah, I only know one thing. I don't care about who needs these conspiracy theories. Honestly, I think any one of these wilder theories, like the global pedo cult is actually running the world, are more likely to be psyops, fake outs from that same elite. John Vance says there has been on record of Stephen Harper saying he would impoverish the nation for the trade war. There is no solution for Canadian sovereignty. I don't know what you mean. Is there Canadian sovereignty? Zero Hedge, says Art Bedge. Art Bell says that Zero Hedge reports there's been a mysterious surge in Romanian illegal immigrants crossing from Canada into Maine. Tell KMG to knock it off. Yeah. John Vance says there's no real opposition in Canada, only snakes of lifetime politicians throwing the people a bone every once in a while. They don't even throw them. Anyway, let me grab my coffee before Kevin rolls in. Yeah, they don't even throw out a bone like American politicians do. It doesn't appear. I mean, maybe Pierre Poilievre, however you say that guy's name. But, right. Yeah, my new take on Trump is that he's kind of he's like these many influencers who kind of get the pulse of what's the populist right wing pulse, and they throw out and they massage that those are impulses, but they're not really on our side. And Trump, I mean, he's sort of the influencer president. He's like one of these guys who who says a lot of the right things, but isn't really on our side. This is what I think. All right. Okay, so Kevin's having issues with camera. Let's see if we can fix this. Okay. Mirror my camera. Let me get rid of that. Maybe that's causing it. Guests. No band guest. It's not letting Kevin access his camera. I don't know how to fix this. I'm looking. Okay. Audio, nothing there. Camera. General. Huh. I don't know, Kevin. I'm not finding anything in here. Huh. We can try this again. We can. Let me try if there's a way here. Huh. I know it worked last time. Okay, guest. Yeah, not working. Okay. It is not working just yet. Let's see if we've got somebody here. Greetings, Kevin.
Can you see me?
I cannot. Let me see if I can. Yeah, and I don't have controls to turn on your camera from this.
Well, I've been trying to turn it on, and it recognizes your program recognizes my camera. Okay,
Yeah.
it recognizes my camera, but it won't let me. It says the camera was on. Okay, it said cam on, and the white button on the camera is on, which indicates
And
that it
and
should
you've
be connected.
appeared. And
I've
now you've
appeared
appeared as if by magic. Welcome,
as
sir.
if by magic. Okay, there we go.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, something happened. Maybe there's
Well,
just a
I don't know.
delay in it.
It's weird with this lighting here. It's made me look like RFK Jr. I'm not a tanned person, but in this lighting,
Yeah,
hang on just a second.
you've got good
It's
color. Just go with it.
well, let's try this. Is that no,
It's just darker.
no? Well, how about this?
It looks good.
Okay, let's go with that.
Okay.
Let's
Yeah.
go with that. All right.
You don't want to fake it, right? You want to present yourself as you are.
As hideous as I am, yes.
You're looking good, and you've got a nice large bookshelf back there.
It's no, they're not books.
Oh, it's all DVDs, huh?
DVDs and Blu-rays.
Nice,
Well,
nice.
that's one of them.
Yeah,
I have
I can,
others.
I don't even have a thing to play stuff on now. I've just
No?
given up. In fact, I threw away a bunch of CDs and DVDs and stuff. Gave them away, and I regret it. I wish I had my own CDs just to have them as mementos at this point. But I don't even have a system to play them on now. It's just all streaming.
So
Gave
tell me, what is this is on it's called Streamlink or something? StreamYard.
StreamYards.
So how do other people access this?
I'm streaming to YouTube.
Oh, you're streaming to YouTube.
Yeah. Is that
Okay,
okay?
that's fine. So I'll
Also,
be able. Where would I find it on YouTube?
on my YouTube channel,
Which is
Dennis Dale Untethered Live Streams. Yeah, as the
because I
official
want to
title.
let people know that
Yeah.
that I'm on the air with you. Okay.
I also have a tweet up with a link to it that you could just repost also.
Okay. Let me go to that first. Okay.
That would be a quick way to do it.
You're at Elad Sind, are you?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my name backwards. It's not a biblical
Yes.
reference.
Yes, I know.
Everybody thinks I'm making a. Because there is a place in the Old Testament called Elad or Elad or however the Hebrews said it. I have no idea. It's pretty obscure, but I don't even remember what its significance was. And I'll
Okay.
drop a link
Just
to the channel here.
I found that. It's a weird thing with emojis on X now that you would think that so long as I'm signed into the computer, it would recognize all the emojis I've used. But frequently it makes me go back. And, since there's several thousand of them, they're not that easy to find. Not that I only use
Yeah,
two different ones.
I don't mess with them. Yeah.
So you wanted to talk about Canada.
Yeah, or whatever else that came to mind. But yeah, I thought, why not? I mean, I realized in preparation that it's exactly 3 years now since the Truckers Convoy was declared terrorist. It was on Valentine's Day, I think, when they did that.
Yes. Yeah.
And they went out and arrested people. So,
And
what?
then the courts held that Trudeau's imposition of the Emergencies Act was illegal.
Well,
But what are they going to do? What are the,
yeah.
too
What
too
sort of
late.
sanction?
It had been done. There were no sanctions.
I mean, and they had already routed them, right? They'd probably already chased them out and achieved their goals.
Oh, and
They,
they arrested a bunch of people and charged them with mischief, which apparently is a more serious crime than rape or murder in my country because this has been going on for years now, and they
mischief and
wanted.
aggregated shenanigans, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently the city of Ottawa was terrorized, which it wasn't. Apparently the truckers were honking their horns 24 hours a day. No, the honking ended at 6 p.m. every day. Just endless lies about this. I guess I think the reason that the truckers convoy had such an effect is because it was physical. These were big
Yeah.
rigs,
Yeah.
and you get a bunch of people, at the legislature building with a bunch of signs. And I did that quite a few times during the COVID lockdown in my province of British Columbia. Zero effect.
Yeah.
But it seems that the physicality of big rigs, it makes a difference.
Well, it was brilliantly effective. And yeah, they're these giant trucks, and they also represented the what power there is out there, right? And among the common people, they were. I mean, all of a sudden here, everybody knows you. Every now and then we even say it. We depend on these truckers, wherever you are, they're delivering food. They're delivering basically everything we use in modern society. And there are these wonderful scenes of convoys heading to Ottawa, being cheered on by people along the side of the road. It was,
They started from my city of Victoria. That's where the convoy began.
yeah, and that must have really put a chill, up their spine, I guess.
Well, if you look at British Columbia was based on several industries: fishing, forestry, mining. But to the people who run this province and the people who run this country, the idea of men working with their hands is just so yucky. We
Yeah,
don't want to think about it. I mean, the people who run this province actually believe that the wealth that we enjoy is manna from heaven because we're just such
right.
good people here.
Yeah, you deserve it. Or somehow it's produced by the chattering class, that's the real work.
It is the real work. And in my city of Victoria, what's the business here? Government is the business. The government of the province of British Columbia, the government of the city of Victoria, and the surrounding municipalities, all of the agencies that span the city and the various municipalities. That's who people work for in Victoria, and well, also let's see, dope shops and vape shops and
Right.
tattoo parlors and ethnic food and designer coffee. Basically, it's a potlatch, with money going back and forth. You
Well, it's
know,
a service economy, Kevin. Remember that. In the future is us selling each other baubles and cups of coffee
well, I tell you, it's. I just read on my show, which I'm going to plug here. It's the KMG show on Rumble, which is Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific, 7 to 9 Eastern. I reviewed Mary Harrington's book, Feminism Against Progress. And this divide in feminism between the women who sit in offices or work for government agencies or NGOs doing God knows what, typing emails, I suppose, a few emails a day. And the women that I see working in these service industries, like fast food places, who are run off their feet. They
right.
they work really hard for very little money, and to the feminists and to I don't know, our elite, these people are nothing. They're worthless. I guess, they deserve what they have because they should have been born with richer parents or
Right.
more well-connected parents. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned trucking, and I want to talk about trucking because my friend Frank Wright, my English friend Frank Wright, who I commend to you, he has a Substack and he writes for LifeSite News. And he published an article for LifeSite News on Thursday of this week called "Why is Trump Threatening Canada? There's more to it than you think." Begins with a note from LifeSite News co-founder Steve Jalsevic. With these crucial revelations now reported here, many Canadians will be asking why Trump did not take a more diplomatic course of communicating directly to the Canadian public and the leader of the opposition Conservative Party that is almost certain to form a new government in a couple of months. Well, we'll see about that. The massive criminal Chinese drug enterprise at the center of Trump's threats to Canada is a shocking situation that corrupt Trudeau and the Liberals are responsible for not stopping and must be quickly dealt with. Trump's impatient big stick policy handed Canada's widely despised Liberal Party an unexpected opportunity to possibly gain votes in an almost imminent Canadian federal election. They are already exploiting anti-American, anti-Trump sentiment based on fake news to distract from the real issue. Trump's blunt threats and limited public explanation have disturbed most Canadians who are not even aware of the drug operation or its extent. Better communications with the Canadian public and the opposition leader would have likely brought about a good result and enhanced Trump's long-term relationship with Canadians. In the end, Trump will have done the US and Canada a hugely positive deed in provoking a forceful shutdown of the Chinese fentanyl drug crime syndicate in Canada. Now, J.D. Vance said 2 days ago that, well, the American government has been talking about this, about fentanyl and organized crime coming from Canada. Well, they haven't, I spend more time looking at Canadian news than almost anyone. And even given the fact that the Canadian media does not want to talk about this, the Trump administration hasn't done a very good job here. Now, as far as Pierre Poilievre goes, well, he has a problem, which is that all Canadian political parties in Canada are suborned by the Communist Chinese. The Liberals,
Really?
Conservatives, the NDP, all of them. And Poilievre is running on the basis that I love the immigrants more than the Liberals love the immigrants, which has been Conservative Party dogma for 40 years now. For 40 years. But just to give you, I'm going to read you something which you might find shocking about, what's going on in this country. And it's from a man called Stephen Punwazi. And, well, imagine Canada's largest province, economic powerhouse, that it quadruples the number of trucking schools in that province in the matter of a couple of years. And that these trucking schools, they're all run by Sikhs. And they are not regulated, to speak of, by the government. And that the Canadian trucking industry is largely dominated by Sikhs now. And furthermore, that in Western Canada, well, let's just say, certainly British Columbia and to a large extent in Alberta, organized crime is dominated by Sikhs. There's an ongoing drug war in Greater Vancouver amongst rival Sikh drug gangs that has claimed several hundred deaths in recent decades. And Kim Boland at the Vancouver Sun has written about this, but it's a problem because under human rights legislation in Canada and in my province, if you write anything that tends to make protected groups, and they're called protected groups, uncomfortable, it's against the law, and you are subject to civil penalties. Here's his thread, okay? Neither Canada and America are saying what the drug border conflict is about out loud, so I guess I'll do it. This is about Canada's trucking industry and Ontario's truck driving schools that popped up overnight. First of all, you've probably seen a chart making the rounds proving Canada isn't a big source of drugs in America. When I talk stats, I always tell people to take careful note of what it's showing. In this case, it's drug seizures on the Canadian and Mexican borders. So Mexican border, huge. Canadian border, tiny. Now, if you're in America, you've probably been reading stories like this. Take note of where these truckers are being arrested. Spoiler, not the border. Just one of these buses was 6% of the volume of drugs seized at the border, but obviously wouldn't be in the border data. One story from September 2024 from publication called Today's Trucking. Canadian trucker arrested after 124 kilogram cocaine bust in Indiana. An Ontario truck driver, plea deal in California, drug gang. Canada and U.S. have arguably the closest trade relationship of any two countries. Every day, $3.5 billion in goods flow through back and forth with an average of 13.7 thousand trucks crossing per day. That's a lot of frickin' trucks and nearly impossible to screen at all. As a result, a high degree of trust is granted to logistics companies, especially bonded and trusted firms. Companies like FedEx need to move materials really fast. Used to be hard to become a cross-border trucker since companies don't want to risk hiring a smuggler. In 2019, Ontario snuck in legislation to lower regulations to make private career colleges. Then, with the help of a government-owned joint venture firm no one knows, our government's own, they combed rural parts of developing countries to drum up business for colleges that popped up overnight. Trucking was huge. Between 2017 and 2024, Ontario went from 80 truck driving schools to 280. The province has 6 auditors for 600 private career colleges, almost half for trucks, apparently. No enforcement standards. The industry thinks it's absurd. There are over 80% of carriers that are satisfactorily unaudited. As you might have guessed, that's a really big combination, really bad combination. CBC Marketplace did an investigation recently where they try to buy a truck driver certification, and then the person threatens to set them on fire when they then try to back out of the deal. It's also important to remember Canada had no checks or balances for its study program, no background checks or school verification. Just show up at the airport with proof of funds and a letter they won't verify. That's it. That's how it worked until last year. To recap, money laundering capital of the world, that's Canada. No school regulations, criminals run certifications, desperate folks from developing countries with no standard of entry, no scrutiny for cross-border traffic. Still surprising this is happening. Anyway, I guess there's 2 morals to this story. Statistics in the hands of someone that doesn't understand them is more dangerous than a shotgun. Canada is more likely to freeze a trucker's bank account for honking than being a transnational fentanyl smuggler. Since Canada is the type of place where a billionaire can get murdered and no one gets arrested, I should probably note that if I disappear, it was the butter sculpting industry. That would refer to the Sherman couple in Toronto who were murdered. They owned a shady drug company, shady billion-dollar drug company, and they were found by their pool in their mansion in Toronto in these ritualistic poses, tied up as if to appear that it was a ritualistic suicide, and it wasn't. How dependent is Ontario on foreign truckers with zero security? Mark Miller, who's the immigration minister, reversed the previous immigration minister's no scrutiny study visas for private colleges and made student screening mandatory. Now trucking schools that ran for 30 plus years are shutting down. So this is what's happening. Chinese factories, communist Chinese factories in British Columbia. We had the biggest bust in North American history just a week ago, of a factory outside Vancouver, a factory that makes fentanyl precursors. You know what precursors are. You've seen Breaking Bad, right?
Yes.
And so these precursors, Sikh truck drivers drive them into the United States. And of course, it's not like marijuana or even like cocaine. Fentanyl is insanely powerful in small doses. These kinds of fentanyl raids, they capture enough fentanyl that could kill, wipe out a city, right? And see, this is one of the big problems with Canada that, the Liberal leadership race, that Chrystia Freeland, who was the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, she resigned and brought down Trudeau. And so I guess she thought she was going to be the next Liberal leader and Prime Minister. But this fellow called Mark Carney, who holds 3 citizenships, Canada, Britain, and Ireland, and who was the governor of the Bank of Canada and also, not at the same time, but the governor of the Bank of England, he shows up and he's Davos man. And he's going to save Canada.
Right.
He literally is Davos man. And suddenly, it's going to be Mark Carney. And I know it's going to be Mark Carney because the Sikhs determine who gets elected the leader of all the federal parties and most of the provincial parties in Canada. Instant armies of Sikhs are mobilized to determine who wins.
Yeah, I know something about this Carney guy. They credit him. Just like here, we credited Larry Summers and a couple of other guys. They were famously or infamously on the cover of Time magazine as as the people who saved us in 2008. And I think in Canada, don't they credit Carney with saving Canada?
Well, I guess he saved Canada by the same thing that happened in the United States. That, you know, those guys who were so reckless, they nearly destroyed the entire world economy.
Yeah,
We're going to make them whole, and we're going to give them even more power. That was
yeah.
the deal.
But Carney's not the one who suggested they make the truckers terrorists. That was some other banker, wasn't it? McKay or something.
Oh, I
Suggested
could.
to Friedland, oh, you've got to declare these guys terrorists, and then you can shut this down right away.
Well, okay, I must have forgotten that. I will tell you that the Proud Boys are a official terrorist group in Canada on the ancient Canadian principle of we don't like you.
Yeah, yeah,
The Proud Boys are not a terrorist organization. It's a silly name, I think, and I think Gavin McInnes is a silly person. Basically, it was a kind of drinking club, as far as
yeah.
I could tell, or just a clubhouse, and it became known where they were, and they got set upon by people looking to beat them up, and in a few cases, they defended themselves, and this is the
Yes.
basis on which they are called terrorists.
I saw them in action here in the summer of 2020 in Portland. They would show up to they would show up to downtown Portland to have a flag wave or a quote unquote back the blue rally, knowing that they were going to prompt this hysterical response from Antifa. And it was always the same dynamic. This smaller group of Proud Boys or similar. There was another group called Patriot Prayer, a local group here that is modeled on Proud Boys. And frankly, they are very silly LARPers. It was really a battle of the evil against the stupid. But every time Antifa would descend, in the full black bloc, and try, use with intimidation and a little violence to run them out of town, or would run them out of town. And the press here dutifully reported it as we're being assaulted by these terroristic Proud Boy organizations.
Well,
You
it's
know,
the same thing with the TERFs everywhere, or anti-groomers. Anytime, the I suppose you might call them the old school feminists get together and say that men are not women, they get set upon by these women who are not men, these deranged, often large,
yeah,
dangerous people. Well, you started it. Well, how did we start it? By showing up. You're
yeah.
not allowed to show up. You're not allowed to speak because it's hate speech. I don't know. Did you see what the Chancellor of Germany said in response to Vance?
What?
Okay. This is from a New York Times article by Jim Tankersley yesterday. So it's the official word. All right. Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, said a commitment to never again is not reconcilable with support for the AfD. Scholz said the AfD had trivialized Nazi atrocities like the concentration camp at Dachau. I don't know. There's no evidence. I
Right.
don't know. I think someone associated with the AfD said that in terms of German history, which is 2,000 years old, say, that 12 years between 1933 and 1945 was not all that significant. Okay.
Yeah.
So on Saturday, Merz defended Germany's laws that prohibit particular forms of speech, including hate speech, and banned Nazi slogans, including on social media. Quote, we stick to the rules which are given by our democratic institutions. Free speech remains free speech and remains part of our open democratic
Okay.
society. And fake news, hate speech, and offenses remain subject to legal restraints and controlled by independent courts. Unquote. So, in other words, in Germany, if you say Angela Merkel made a terrible mistake in allowing these migrants. The migrants are still flowing in. They are bad news. Well, your life can be ruined. for this. We're just saying this. And the more popular the AfD becomes in Germany, the greater the calls from within the government to ban it. And of course, the German government is astroturfing all of these protests against the AfD. This is not my opinion. This is a fact.
Right.
This has been admitted. Well, we have the funds for pro-democratic demonstrations, and pro-democratic means anti-AfD, because democracy now means that the progressives always win. And if you're not progressive, you're anti-democratic. It's as simple as that. And if one of the bad guys wins, for instance, the most recent election in Romania, oh, bad guy
Right.
in front. So we'll just cancel the election.
Yeah.
Why? Russian interference.
Yeah. A couple of Russian trolls.
Yeah.
And it would be comic if it wasn't so serious how the same stupid model is deployed still in Germany and all over Europe now that was deployed against Trump. This nonsense about misinformation, this nonsense about Russian interference, the same language. It's extremely disheartening when you see how similar it is, and it's in the U.S. Things are shaken up now with Trump's return, but you realized at some point that there's no difference between foreign policy and domestic policy for these governments. It's that is they're talking about USAID right now and all the shenanigans they're up
Well, it's not
with.
just USAID, it's the National Endowment for Democracy,
Right.
or any of these organizations that have democracy in their name, which were set up on the neocons, set these up under Reagan in order to establish a permanent deep state around
Right.
the world.
Well, you realize though when they talk about their tactics, their actions abroad, wait a minute. This is precisely what they've been doing at home for years, at least until 2016, probably long before that. It just went nuts with the arrival of Trump. But they treat their domestic populations precisely as they treat any troublesome population anywhere. You know, the
Well,
same dirty tricks.
there's good news here, because recently, within the last few weeks, we found out, the enormously strong opposition to Orban, who's a
Oh,
democratic authoritarian. They're
yeah.
wailing now. We don't have any money anymore.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
not? Because America shut off
Yeah.
the cash. If you want to look at, I want them to look at Ireland. Do you know that 16% of the budget of Ireland goes to NGOs? Now that's just internal money. How much external money is going to Irish NGOs is a very interesting
Right.
question. How does Samantha Power, that Irish banshee, how does she get to be wealthy?
Right.
What is it? How much? It turns out she's worth $15 million or something, or maybe $30 million or something.
Yeah.
Doing well by doing good, they used to call it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, what do these people make? Their salaries are good salaries, maybe 200,000 a year, but not generally the kind of salary by which in the space of a few years become a multimillionaire.
No, no, I'll tell you a personal story. Some years ago, when I was out of work and, well, pretty much destitute, I would go on long walks in Victoria, and I would go past these, bougie coffee shops, right? And there would be people sitting there, and they were obviously in for the long haul, and they had their moleskin notebooks, and they'd be scribbling in their moleskin notebooks, or maybe they had their laptop and they'd be typing something. I don't know, maybe a novel or something,
Yeah.
a screenplay.
Because
And
nobody's done
then,
that before.
and I'd go on these long walks, and I'd come back, like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, and they were still there. Now we're talking about people in their 20s and 30s, right? And I thought, who are these people? How is it that they get to
Right.
spend all day in coffee shops? And then it hit me, they work for NGOs.
Yeah.
They
And
work for NGOs.
This is a
We had, when the Green Party members were elected in Victoria, I happened to be walking through the first place in Victoria, the city of Victoria, to elect a Green MLA. And this is one of the richest neighborhoods in Victoria. And I knew the Green Party candidate was going to win, and the NDP, the so-called Socialist Party, didn't have a chance because in the street that I was on, it was all Green Party signs. And I thought, well, since no one who works for a living has ever voted for a Green Party, who were these people? And I thought, okay, they're government employees of one sort or another, or government consultants, of which there are legion in Canada. Or it's inherited money, or they work for NGOs.
right. I think this is a significant source of the NGO's strength. You know, it's not just those high profile people we see who are becoming millionaires. There are countless people there making tidy little six-figure salaries that represent, you know, just like, you know, the vast employee base of the government works against efforts to shrink it, you know. Likewise, there are all these people in places, you know, in influential places like DC, who are, you know, they make their living via things like USAID, and they're going to, you know, they're not an inconsiderable number of people that are going
No,
to
no, it's a whole class. Have you seen the stories coming out of Washington D.C. and Metro D.C. that housing, that the
supposedly,
market
yeah,
has exploded, the
yeah.
number of listings and the prices are just collapsing?
I would love to
This
get
is
in on that.
outstanding,
I love it.
outstanding news. And you see, in the past, well, first of all, if you'd asked me for a wish list of what Trump would do, I thought disparate impact. Just ban this phrase, disparate impact. Anybody who mentions this at the
Right,
Department of Justice gets fired, right?
right,
You know, we're not going to do disparate impact anymore, but
yeah,
perhaps more important, the NGOs, zero them out, every
yes,
single one. Because, you know, one of the reasons that the right, if you want to call it that, or even like Conservatism Inc., has been so fractious, is there's not that many jobs to go around, right?
right,
But on the left, the progressives and the Democratic Party, you know, when you lose office, say, you know, when you lose control of the White House or either House of Congress or both, all of these staffers are put, they lose their jobs. The reason that they are going nuts now is that for decades, oh,
yeah,
yeah, my party lost an election, so an NGO will hook me up.
yeah,
An NGO hooked me up and I'll be earning 150K, 200K a year or whatever, just biding time until we get back
yeah,
into office.
yeah. I
And
think,
that's gone now.
yeah, and that's what's brilliant about Trump's move. Their whole patronage network is going away, right? And it strikes me to hear you say that there's no equivalent on the right, really, except if you're a neocon, if you're that kind of so-called right. You know, if you're a neocon or you know someone connected to the you know to the war party, right, left, there's a place you can go, an NGO you can go, somewhere you can go. But for anybody who's sort of libertarian, populist, just, you know, conservative, genuinely conservative, there is no patronage system that's waiting to catch you when you leave office. You have to go find a real job.
Well, yeah, but that's coming to an end. I
Yeah,
mean, Bill Kristol's Weekly Standard, it was originally funded by Rupert Murdoch. And so at the end of the Cold War, the neoconservatives thought, well, what are we going to do? We need an enemy. How about the entire Muslim world? But apparently that wasn't enough for them. So in the first years of the Weekly Standard, it's like, let's drum up support for a war against China. And I guess Rupert Murdoch wasn't pleased with that. So he ended the funding, right? So
right.
we know that Bill Kristol is heavily subsidized by the deep state through U.S. aid and God knows how many other organizations, and that has come to an end. But it's true what you said about the neocons, because someone I know, let's just call her a former colleague, that she has been in the United States for some time, and the places that she worked, they're all neocon affiliated. And when I knew her, and I knew her well, she was not a neocon, not in the slightest. She was rather anti-neocon, but I guess she discovered, or it was put to her forcefully, that if you want to get ahead in conservative journalism, you had better be a neocon, and you had better be Israel, 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 because
Yeah.
otherwise you are unemployable in this sphere. But this is coming to an end. I mean, how many people do you think read Crystal's Bulwark or whatever it's
Yeah.
called now,
I
or
forget it's out there.
even look at National Review?
Yeah.
I started reading National Review in 1969 when I was 14 years old. I sort of based my Weltanschauung, as they say, on it. And it got boring. And then John O'Sullivan and Peter Brimelow came along in the 1990s and made it relevant again. And William Buckley sacked both of them.
Couldn't have that. Yeah.
And do you ever see people talk about what
No.
somebody wrote in National Review? Ever?
No. Maybe if somebody's pointing and tittering at some silliness
Hmm.
on X, right?
Yeah.
But even that, because Kevin Williamson apparently is just sort of gone dark, because he used to be the guy. I think that's the name, Kevin Williamson, this big, awkward-looking
Yeah, he looks like
mulatto.
Ming the Merciless,
Yeah,
only with a serious morbid
yeah,
obesity problem.
yeah. And his whole thing, he's sort of Richard Hanania from the right, or I guess Hanania is supposed to be rightist, but yeah. This is an unfortunate thing, and I think our friend Steve Saylor is kind of adopting this. Going to make a career partly based on pointing and tittering at the right and the stupidity of the right, and the supposedly cringy right wing now.
Steve Saylor quotes and reposts Richard Hanania all the time.
Yeah,
I've known like Steve Saylor for a long time. And for years, I suppose, my employment prospects in this country are blighted by the fact that, oh, that Kevin Grace is always saying nice things about Steve Saylor. And he's linked with Steve Saylor through VDARE. And about a year ago, Steve Saylor stopped following me on Twitter. And I thought, we go back a long way. I have spoken to you at great length over the telephone.
yeah,
And I asked him, what was up, and I never heard a response. And I suppose it's because I've just decided civic nationalism, I'm not having any more of that stupidity.
yes,
Okay, civic nationalism in a North American context, it means that immigrants come over and tell us
yes,
what it means to be Canadian or American.
yeah, and it's well, what's striking, and I went back there. He came to mind because he wrote the most ridiculous column recently, and I posted a comment on something I had determined I was never going to do. I wasn't, just because, okay, if I'm done reading this fellow, if I'm done taking him seriously, I'm not going to go in there and fight with his acolytes in the comment thread anymore. But I couldn't help myself because of something he wrote recently. But I kind of checked out of there a couple of years ago, because I was trying to get him to admit that Trump was, at least in 2016, Trump showed up offering civic nationalism. It was really quite astounding how much what Saylor had been preaching all this time, Trump actually brought to the table. Hey, citizenship is what it's all about, because Trump, is deliberately not talking about race or that sort of thing, obviously. And Steve's response to Trump was to just sort of shrug and shuffle away in embarrassment apparently because he just doesn't want to be associated with this boorish figure, you know. And I think that just once he should have at least addressed it, why I'm not a Trumpist, for, seriously. But
Well, there's nothing to be done. Peter Hitchens is like this in Britain. Oh, you won't believe just how horrible it's become in Britain. And he's been writing. He's been mining this vein for 20 years. And when it gets down to it, there's nothing to be done.
yeah,
And it turns out with Trump, as they say, as the kiddies are saying, you can just do things, right? And I
yeah,
guess perhaps I may have gently mocked Steve Saylor about his hysteria over COVID-19, which was, he was one of the people who deeply embarrassed himself over this.
yeah,
But no, as I say, I'm just fed up with this. That oh yeah, we all have to adapt. No, apparently it's we have to adapt, and they don't have to adapt.
right,
No,
right,
it's always down to us,
yeah,
right? And of course, Saylor, pioneered this discussion about racial disparities in crime. But what is to be done
yeah.
about it? Hmm?
Well, that's what drives me nuts about him and, frankly, the guys over at Amran, Jared Taylor. These guys are going to be bleeding right to the very end, right? That, when the meteor strikes, they're going to be sitting there talking about, did you know there are disparities in crime between black and white people? Yeah, guys, I mean, like you said, you could just do things. But Saylor and many, many others, I think, they see, like I said, they see Trump in and say, you know what, let's do some stuff. Let's break some China. And they all suddenly lose their enthusiasm, I mean, it's as if human nature is such that people are frankly content. They don't think things are really going to change. And they're content to sit here and complain about the world going to hell because they think, well, I'll be dead long before it actually gets there. I don't know.
Well, back in the 90s, Sam Francis of holy memory was mocking National Review and Conservatism Inc., referring to their latest import, from India, who's telling us all what being conservative means and what being American means. And
Yes.
Dinesh D'Souza was the fellow who destroyed Sam Francis's
Well, did
career. Do
he?
you know how this happened?
No, I didn't know this.
Dinesh D'Souza had got in trouble for something spicy, mildly spicy he had written. So he's flailing around desperately trying to save his own skin. And Sam Francis had got into a controversy, I believe, with the Southern Baptists because they, at their conference, were moaning about slavery. Oh, slavery, slavery. And Sam Francis pointed out something, an uncomfortable truth, that regardless of what one thinks of slavery in a historical context, there is not a single condemnation of slavery in either the Old or the New Testament.
Right.
And so Dinesh D'Souza, this was a lifeline to him.
Yes.
I'm going to destroy Sam Francis and get him fired from the Washington Times, which was, a major part of his income, and make him radioactive. But I mean, this was at a time when Russell Kirk, who is considered to be the founder of the modern conservative movement in America, that he had made a joke that Mitch Decter, Noman Podhoritz's wife, believed that Tel Aviv was the capital of America. And that was it for Russell Kirk. He became an
Really.
unperson in the conservative movement.
And Kirk was wonderful. And Sam Francis, obviously, I mean, he just looms gigantic now, I think, just thinking back to the things he was saying so long ago.
The
He was
Middle
so,
American Revolt. He preached the
yeah.
Middle American Revolt, and that is what we have got with Trump.
And the better you are, the more likely you're to be brought down by these assholes.
Well, no, I told you. I think going back, it would have been like 2005, after the 2004 election. when it was Bush versus Gore, or sorry, it was Bush versus John Kerry. I said, if you're white and working class in America, what reason would you have to vote for
Yeah.
either of these men?
Right.
Because their message to you is hurry up and die. We
Yes.
don't need you.
Yeah. Well, that was what was almost revolutionary about Trump in 2016. At some point, I realized, wow, I can't remember the last time I saw a presidential candidate whose pitch was simply, hey, American citizen, here's what I'm going to do for you. And not even the white thing, but it was sort of implicitly appealing to, what the white majority. Whereas, he was up against the worst of them, Hillary Clinton, but, everybody up to that point had come in focusing on what particular group they were going to help. Nobody preaching to the citizenry as a whole, and certainly by implication, everybody just saying, yeah, well, white people don't really count. We're taking you for granted. At the best you could get from them was that they were taking you for granted, you know, of course, if not being just outright hostile to your very existence.
No, absolutely. And I probably told you this before, but my opinion of Donald Trump before he ran for president was low. All right. I considered him a bombastic vulgarian. And he is a bombastic vulgarian, but you see, I had misread the temper of the United States and I suppose of the American character. Now, this sort of thing goes back a long way. When Nixon made his famous Checkers speech in 1952, when he was Eisenhower's vice presidential candidate, here's my wife Pat wears a good, respectable Republican
Republican
cloth
cloth
coat,
coat, yeah.
and we got a gift of this dog, a Cocker Spaniel, Checkers. Well, we're not giving him back, right? And Malcolm Muggeridge, who was I think, a Telegraph foreign correspondent in Washington, that he asked around and he thought about it. He filed a report saying even Americans aren't going to fall for this half-baked corn. Well, they did.
Yeah.
That speech rescued his career. Now, in my own case, when Bill Clinton was running for president in 1992, with all the bimbo eruptions, and then when he and his wife went on 60 Minutes in just the most excruciating interview I'd ever seen until Tiger Woods, you know, and I thought, oh my God, he's finished. He is just so vile, so disgusting. And I was completely wrong. People just don't care about it. And that was the genius of Trump. And I always tell people, don't call yourself a conservative. Call yourself right wing. Better yet, call yourself a patriot. Because conservatism, Sam Francis called them beautiful losers. He was talking about the older conservatives, but they haven't been so beautiful for a long time. Someone like Mitch McConnell. When some old guy divorces his wife or his wife leaves him and he shows up with a new, much younger Chinese wife, particularly one who's hooked into the Washington power structure, I think CCP.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And so many of these conservative figures ending up with Chinese wives.
Interesting.
That,
Yeah.
that is very, very curious. But no, Trump expresses a very powerful form of Americanism. And I suppose it's partly because I'm, Canadian and somewhat more genteel, although, of course, there's lots of Canadians that are not genteel at all. I thought that this was too much and I was wrong. And the things that Trump was saying, I was captivated by his campaign from the beginning because, going back to what I said about the 2004 election, it was obvious that there were tens of millions of votes just there on the table and no
Yeah.
one wanted to pick
Yes.
them up.
Yeah. And there seemed to be this agreement. We will just, okay, I won't take them if you don't. All right, great.
Yeah.
So they would leave them over there and disempower this, you know, the American voter. I do have to give you credit, though, going back to COVID, for having been on the money from the start. I remember thinking it as a real problem when it came in, and it was took me a good year maybe before I realized that the whole thing was a scam.
Well, if you saw, like, who was dying from the beginning, okay? It was all nursing homes. And it's all people in their 80s, right? And I thought, where are the young people dying?
Right.
It's all, and then within, like, say, a month or two, it was established that the only people who were seriously threatened by this, by people who were very old and or exceedingly overweight, or they had wrecked immune systems. Now, my father died of COVID or with COVID, although it's the policy of my government that if anyone had COVID when they die, you know, then they
That's the
died.
cause. Yeah.
Okay. My father was 89 years old when he died, and he had been involuntarily hospitalized for severe dementia, and also his liver, his kidneys, and all the rest of it were completely shot. And 89 years old is significantly more years than the average
Yeah.
death in Canada. And I get the impression, I got the impression from the beginning that so many of these people becoming hysterical about COVID thought that, well, if it weren't for COVID, everyone would live forever.
Apparently, yeah. And you realize, and apparently it doesn't occur to people, but when they talk about raw numbers, they're not taking into account that factor, like, very old people dying. And there is a statistic for this, which accounts for okay, a person dies. How close were they to the average age of death, right? And there's a statistic that measures basically, how many years might you have been denied by this death, right? Which is way better than counting, say, an 80-year-old dying as the same as a healthy 16-year-old dying. Obviously they're vastly different things,
Yes,
you know.
yes, that is absolutely true. And of course, if you look at long long-term care facilities, the intensive ones, right? The average longevity of anyone who is checked into one of these places is 6 months. And that's pretty much exactly how long my father lasted in one of these places. Now, one of the things that COVID taught me was there are few people who can understand any number bigger than 1,000.
Yeah.
Because, oh, look at the death totals here. Well, if you're going to count everyone who has a virus, any particular virus, let's assume the argument I made at the time, which I thought was a good one. There's a virus called the Epstein-Barr virus, and it causes mononucleosis. Now, there are people who suffer from a fake disease called ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome.
Right.
Okay. And they claim that Epstein-Barr virus is responsible for this. But let's postulate that Epstein-Barr virus is in fact deadly. About 50% of the population has it. Actually, it's more than that, actually. It's very high. I think it's like 90% of the population has people over 14 have Epstein-Barr virus. If we were to postulate that Epstein-Barr virus was deadly, then anyone who dies with Epstein-Barr virus, it was Epstein-Barr virus that killed them, right? We could say that. Now, people were saying in Canada, well, we did so much better than the United States. Look at Florida. And I thought, okay, do you have any idea how old and how fat
Right.
Florida is? But no, going back to numbers, oh my God, they're shrieking about these numbers. And I thought, do you know how many people die every day?
Right.
Because when the number of deaths attributed to COVID reached 500 in the province of Alberta, which is a population of around 4 million people, there was shrieking, absolute terror. Okay. And this was in the space of a year, or more than a year, actually, 500 people. And I checked the numbers for the last year before COVID, 2019, 26,000 people died in the province of Alberta. Just no sense of proportion
Right.
amongst these people, none whatsoever.
Well, and now looking back, it seems to me when people say, no, the vaccines were good, they saved all these lives, they're not comparing these lives supposedly saved by vaccines against alternatives. They're comparing it against had we done nothing. We were talking about Steve Zale early. He was ridiculing, all alternatives to the vaccine regime as let her rip, right? Like, oh yeah, this just you know horribly irresponsible strategy of just letting it work its way through the population. When in fact, what we're really comparing the vaccine regime against is all the alternatives that were offered by people like Peter McCullough, the doctor who's become, he's got a whole career now as a COVID skeptic. People who would have treated it with ivermectin or hydrochloroquine, people who had all, bacteria, people who had different ideas,
Vitamin
targeted.
D.
Yeah.
I recommend everyone take vitamin D.
And RFK Jr. used to say it all the time. He said not once during the whole affair did Fauci or anybody else get up and say, you know what, guys, everybody start taking vitamin D. That's one thing to do. They didn't offer any single alternative to the vaccines. It was simply mask up, shut down the economy, and wait for Pfizer to save the day.
Well, let's look at the treatment of people. Well, let's look at the mass murder perpetrated by the governor of New York State, right? Sending infected people into nursing homes. It turns out, during COVID, the worst possible place you could go would be any kind of care facility, the worst place. But so remdesivir, okay?
Right.
How many people did that kill? In combination with massive amounts of morphine. Because at these places, in these nursing homes in Canada, they're all staffed by Asians, and they fled in terror. For the rest, we have to keep these people quiet, so we'll give them remdesivir, and we'll just give them enough morphine to kill you, which is what happened. Also, intubation. Intubation.
Yeah, that was just disastrous.
The form of fishing, catch and release fishing,
Yeah,
which is popular for some reason. Do you know that it kills like 50% of all the fish?
They don't survive it.
Well, it's pretty traumatic to the fish,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and well, let's look at masks. Okay, well, we know they don't work because they're not strong enough or not fine enough to keep out the respiratory particles. But let's assume that they were efficacious in some way. Let's look at the negatives. Let's look at the negatives of breathing in carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at this. Let's look at the stress induced by wearing these masks for long periods of time. Let's look at all of the people terrified by COVID-19 who decided to self-medicate with food, alcohol, and drugs. Do we want to count the number of deaths? Or let's look at cortisol levels in these people, because cortisol kills. And if you're told that, oh my God, there's a disease that's going to kill everybody, and there's nothing, all the lies that we were told, that COVID-19 can stay alive on surfaces for 9 days. I believe that was the number of days.
Yeah.
If that were true, everyone in the world would have had COVID within a couple of weeks.
People were calling it airborne AIDS early on.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. And I'm talking about, they're comparing now, in retrospect, the apologists are comparing this supposed numbers, which I don't trust in the first place, of people saved by vaccines versus, doing nothing. They also don't take into account, it's not just deaths, it's also quality of life, the destruction of our economy, the psychological impact, we still haven't recovered from this trauma we were submitted to in 2020.
No,
You
we
know,
haven't. And children are the worst affected. And Mary Harrington talks about that in her book. That I saw incredible things. I was living out at my late father's condo for a few months in 2020 in Surrey, and I was walking through this mall parking lot, and I saw a Chinese woman with a small child in a car seat, and the child was in the back, and she was in the front. She was wearing a mask, and the baby was wearing a mask. And I thought, all right, how are you going to feed this baby then? How are you going to, change its diaper or dress it? The whole thing was absolutely absurd. But I still, to this day, see people wearing masks and wearing masks outdoors. And it got to the point where I had to restrain myself from running up to these people and shaking them and saying, particularly in Victoria, where it's a very windy city here, and shaking them, saying, "What is wrong with you?"
yeah,
And I said, here's a demonstration for you. Okay. I have a cigarette in my hand and see it? Now it's
yeah,
gone. Do you know how vast the atmosphere is?
yeah. They're still out there. We still get them here. People wandering around with masks
You're
on.
back in Seattle now, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. So, which is virtually indistinguishable from Portland regarding, attitudes and
Which is
whatnot.
virtually distinguishable from Victoria, British Columbia.
Really.
Oh, well, no, I mean, is it the whole environmental panic, the whole, oh, we feel terribly guilty for terrible racist things that we had nothing to do with, and just, oh, all our politicians must be homosexual. All our leading
Yeah.
politicians must be homosexual, you know?
There's this thing with gays and women, some women that they almost seem to resent our heterosexuality. They can't have it that they're just healthy, naturally heterosexual men out. They want to think we're all closet cases or something for some reason.
Well, they've been pushing this line for decades, but I was reminded by Mary Harrington's book that by self-definition, the number of people who admit same self-attraction is 3.1%. So why the hell it's nonstop hearing about them, seeing them? Why?
Yeah.
We're talking
I,
about a tiny minority here.
to grow this as a faction, I think. Yeah, I mean, look at what they're doing now, and those numbers aren't the same for young people, though. We can't really trust what young people say. Their brains are mush, and they're just reacting to this propaganda. But supposedly, like now it's genuinely 1 in 10 of them professing some sort of homosexuality or
Well, no, I mean, when
bisexuality.
they talk about non-binary, for instance, I can translate that for you. It means not boring.
Yeah,
I'm not boring. I'm
exactly.
non-binary. What does that mean exactly? And there's no definition of it. No definition at all. Oh, well, there's some days I don't want to, drink beer and watch
Yeah,
football and go to the gym. So I guess what they're feeling feminine. So
yeah,
that makes them non-binary.
yeah,
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, you heard Ricky Gervais on this, with all these people, his latest comedy routine, all these people calling themselves queer, right? Well, how are you queer? Are you having sex with someone of the same sex? Well, no, but I could maybe one
I
day. And
would.
you see this with Hollywood, particularly with Hollywood actresses now. I just go to Wikipedia and I look up these actresses on Disney Plus shows and HBO shows and Apple shows and Amazon shows, and it's like PETA used to be. You want to work in Hollywood? You gotta support PETA. And now you want to
Yeah.
work in Hollywood? You got to be queer. Now you can be. There's a well-known media figure in Britain called Jamila Jamil. You probably never. Actually, she
Mm.
was in uh, the Hulk Attorney at Law. She-Hulk Attorney at Law.
Oh, well, I've
Okay.
heard of that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, so she is this very good-looking, um, Indian woman in Britain, a great figure, and she's had this gilded life, but she never stops moaning and talking about how vile Britain is, in terms of racism. Also, she has severe problems with bees. Apparently, bees hate her. You go to Wikipedia, it's absolutely hilarious. Apparently, bees have a vendetta against her. She describes herself as queer, but she's, I believe, married to some men. She's only ever been with men, but nope, she's queer.
Ah, yeah, I guess you could just profess it and then live your life normally.
Well, that was the joke about Pete Buttigieg, that this joke going back several years. He's not really homosexual at all. It's
Yeah,
just he's such a boring,
yeah.
McKinsey clone that I have to find something
CIA,
that's going to distinguish me,
yeah, yeah,
right?
uh,
Oh, well,
right.
I guess did he took 2 months off or 3 months off for
Maternity
paternity leave?
leave, yeah. Well, yeah, his nipples were sensitive after the
Well, no, I
pregnancy.
mean, it's hilarious to me when you look at this. When you look at, the maternity leave, for an example, that, in Canada, it's something up to a year, right?
Wow.
And if you can be absent for your job and it makes no difference and no one notices you're gone, that means you're surplus to requirements.
Yes. Yeah. Uh, you probably wouldn't want to draw attention to it, but I guess, in today's environment, you can get away with it.
I've been thinking about something. I got this hypothesis that we're talking about the end of DEI, not just in government, but you see it's under assault in private business as well. And the whole ESG mandate pushed by BlackRock. BlackRock is pulling back from this amazingly. BlackRock had been bullying all the companies in America. You will adopt ESG or we'll tell people to sell your stock, right?
Right.
Now, it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You saw these videos. Everyone saw the videos. It was huge for a while. My first day at work at Arthur Anderson or whatever, or some big
Right.
company, right? And you see them in their apartment and they get ready for work and they're skipping down the street or whatever, or, you know, they're on, the LRT or whatever, and there they is at work. And well, I so much look forward to work, and I'll get a cup of gourmet coffee and,
Yeah.
maybe some, high end cookies, or one of these things. And they got the chill out room and they got the games room, and they have this fabulous restaurant, some with wine on tap. And what do these women do all day? I mean, that's a
Yeah.
serious question. What do they do? And it occurred to me that when you're looking at like Fortune 400 or Fortune 1000 companies, there's just this mandate, particularly in fields which have been traditionally male dominated. You got to hire more women. You got to hire
Right.
more women, or else you will suffer. Will we suffer internally? No, you will be punished
Yes.
by DEI, by the Department of Justice, by ESG, and BlackRock. Well, I just get the impression that so many of these high flying women, right, who are earning, like these women that we saw in these videos were starting at like $85,000 a year to do what?
Yeah.
And I just thought that if DEI, ESG is broken in American business, millions of high flying, aspirational women are going to find themselves unemployed.
Yeah. I'm struck. I just listening to you say that, I'm thinking, it's been said a million times that large numbers of unemployed, unoccupied young men is dangerous for society because they could get into trouble. And I think what you're
That's what that
describing,
leads to revolution traditionally in history. The
what,
overproduction of elites. You
yeah,
see it in the French Revolution. All these spoiled priests, right?
and
Suddenly
yep.
deciding they were revolutionaries. All of these minor aristocrats suddenly deciding they were revolutionaries.
But I'm thinking all of these women sort of falsely employed, right? is actually a bad thing in itself too. They should be cut loose and forced back into out here with the rest of us to suffer the vicissitudes of real life, because then they're going to be more likely to marry and depend on a man. Because frankly, having liberated women from depending on men who still do all the real work, it's just we waste all this tons of surplus wealth employing women, and partly the ideological part of it is specifically to deny men wives. It's like this death cult we're in. But I'm thinking, it could be a very good thing if we could just mass unemploy all of these women. And these ones are probably ruined. But the next group coming up, because I think, frankly, taking away these options from women might get us back to marriage and family.
Well, that's what Mary Harrington argues in her book. We need fewer options. We need less choice rather than more choice.
Right.
And this idea of the one. Oh, I'm waiting for the one.
Yeah.
Oh, as I like to joke, what if there is one for me? But what if this woman's in Tanzania? I'm never going to meet her,
Right.
am I?
What are the chances? If there's one, you should say, it's like Robert De Niro in Casino telling the idiot about the slot machines. When the odds are that steep, it's impossible. Don't be an idiot and say it's still possible, right?
Well,
If there's one, it's impossible. Sorry.
it's either a huge theft or you're in on it. You
Yeah.
know, no, it's absolutely right. And these women, the problem that these women have, let's say you get hired at 85 grand a year to send out a few emails at Arthur Anderson, and you think that I have a university education.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so does everyone else now. They've got some sort of post-secondary education, right? And so let's imagine that one of these women meets a plumber, and the plumber earns, let's say he earns 70 grand a year. And let's say he's, in his own way, a cultured man. He reads books, you know, he listens to serious music. She would never consider
Right.
marrying this plumber because that would be social death,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I've seen this, I've seen this in my life. I used to work at the University of British Columbia Library, and one of the head librarians there, section heads, her husband was an electrical engineer, and he was from Austria. And I remember being driven to their house. They had this fabulous house in West Vancouver, overlooking Vancouver and Burrard Inlet. Just, spectacular view. And a bunch of us from work, we went to their place, and he turns on the radio and he's listening to Sibelius's violin concerto. And the women at work were going, how could Margaret have married a man like this
Oh,
beneath
God.
her?
My God.
And the other thing is, and I've worked in offices, dominated by women. It's a toxic environment
Yes.
because these vendettas that occur amongst the women over things that they're so trivial, or they don't even know how this began. Where one woman or a couple of women in
Yeah.
office will terrorize all the other women.
It happened here years ago in the aughts. I think it was when I first lived in the Seattle area. They had this female governor. They were trying to push her, trying to make her president, basically, right? They were trying to push her onto the national stage. She got prominence when they successfully sued the tobacco companies in this ridiculous lawsuit that yielded all this money that they subsequently wasted. But she had an office that was full of women. And everything fell apart for her because the women couldn't get along. It was comic and nobody could say anything about it. But yeah, I mean, the whole office fell apart because all the women were just stabbing
Is
each other
it
in the
Christine
back.
Gregoire?
Yeah, yes. I couldn't remember
She
the name.
was, who, no, I guess during the, what do they call it? The takeover of Capitol Hill in Washington, the
Right.
CHOP or the Chaz, was it?
Chaz.
So you had Jay Inslee was the governor then.
Yeah.
And who was the mayor of Seattle at the
I
time?
forget her name. Yeah, yeah, the Summer of Love lady.
That she said that this was going to be the summer of love. And I'm thinking, a deranged drug dealer
Yes.
who's straight out of like Symbionese Liberation Army in terms of his pretension, has seized one of Seattle's
Yeah.
best neighborhoods and imprisoning thousands of people
Yes.
there. And, all of the assaults and rapes that went on there. And the mayor talking, oh, this is going to be the summer
Yeah.
of love.
And there was no accountability for it. I mean, you think, I'll remind everybody how it ended. It ended with a couple of kids, like 14, 15-year-old black kids from the hood, thought it would be funny to go out there and start some trouble, So they get in a stolen car and they start racing around Chaz, and Chaz has its own militias, of course. They come running out, it's like a third world scene, They come running out and take out the car with gunfire, and they're carrying, rifles, so-called assault rifles. And if you watch the video of it, you can't see the last shots fired. But what happens is all kinds of shots are fired, the car crashes, and then you can hear everybody sort of racing in and surrounding the car in close. And then one or two shots are fired, and it's over. And those last two shots, I'm thinking, almost certainly had to be that somebody executed one of those little boys, right? At close range. But the thing happened. There were no consequences. Nobody went to jail for it. And finally, they cleared up Chaz. That's how it ended. And those weren't the only people that died. There's another case that's really gruesome. Some homeless guy in Seattle became a little local celebrity when he got interviewed on the news, and everybody thought this oddball, charismatic character, this drugged up homeless dude. Well, he got a girlfriend because he was on the news and he was getting attention. He got a girlfriend, and he ended up killing her in their little tent they were living in Chaz, in a brutal fashion. Like she was like beaten to death with a board or something. And they tried to arrest this guy, and they ended up chasing him into. There's a lake there that has this water treatment facility right there that apparently had a big vat of like ammonia or something in it. The guy's running from the cops, and he goes and hides in this little shack that is dominated by a big vat. I want to say ammonia, I have no idea. Whatever strong chemical they're using to purify this water or clean it up. And he dies of suffocation in there. I mean, and this is how it all came to an end. And that mayor never really suffered any sort of, consequences for.
No, I think you have Ted Wheeler, who was mayor of Portland.
Yeah.
Until early this year, that wasn't he chased out of his condo by Antifa?
They knew where he lived in a condominium, and they would surround the place nightly, so he had to abandon it and go live somewhere where they couldn't find him. And then he went to address, and I was actually on the ground that night. He went to address the people who were, there was a siege laid to there's a federal courthouse, and right next door is the downtown police precinct. They call it the Justice Center. And of course, Antifa calls it the Injustice Center. So he goes down to give a speech to address them, to try and mollify this crowd. And it's a total disaster, right? He barely got out of there with his skin. And at one point, they start rioting while he's down there trying to give a speech. They start attacking the federal courthouse or the police station, I forget which. They've fenced this place off, and they start tearing down the fence and going at it. Finally, the cops come out and start tear gassing everybody. And Ted's on the scene, so of course it's like a ritual humiliation for him. He gets tear gassed along with the rest of them, right? And he's down there, and his speech is all about how awful the authorities are. It's all just trying to condescend to these idiots, right? Nothing about, hey, maybe you guys should get peaceful and go home. No, just kissing their butts, right? It's not enough for them. They're chasing them out. Uh, yeah, and he's there. Well, at the last thing that happens is he gets tear gassed along with them, and he's choking. He's got the little surgical mask. Remember, it was COVID days,
Right.
and he's pulling down his mask and choking out. I think this is a little excessive from the police. And then he gets out of there surrounded by security, and they're just basically chasing him out of there.
Well,
So
I
anyway,
just wonder what is wrong with these people because, if you look throughout history, you find many examples of people, of political leaders, even popes who were liberal, and then they got pushed too far, and then they were on the other side, very much on
right.
the other side. I mean, I mean Ted Wheeler being forced by threats of violence out of his condo, but I'm your man. I have
Yeah.
stood up for you. I have criticized the police. I have, you should all be booked and then, released and all that. And okay, you've gone too far
Yeah.
now. But
Well, that's
no, you
what's
can never go too far for the likes of Ted Wheeler.
Well, no, it's not just Ted Wheeler. Apparently, in Portland and other places here, it's not even an alternative. Yeah, you would think, because Ted Wheeler, I think, was never really down with all the excesses. I think he envisioned himself as this progressive technocrat. I mean, he came into office in Portland. It was a lovely place, right? It was kind of a progressive success story. I mean, they have nice mass transit. They have this walkable city. Obviously, they're getting away with it because it was mostly white and they hadn't done a lot of the crazy things that have since ruined everything. It was before the homeless insanity. So he thought he was going to have fun. He's like a big train set, right? He was going to have money to do all of these things, right? And be a hero running a great progressive success story. And then, of course, 2020 happened. But the scary thing is there's no alternative. There's nobody still in Portland, you would think, there would be, and even in a place like Portland, I think the average Joe is not as fucking crazy as their politicians, the political class is. But nonetheless, somehow, for reasons I can't really explain, it's still not an alternative to go, to be conservative, right wing, whatever you want to call it. They're just moderate in opposition to this. Right now, they've got a worse. The city council is worse. It's horrible. They've got a mayor. I don't know much about him. It sounds like he's worse than Wheeler ever was. And they've got a governor in Washington State, Oregon, who's terrifying. His name's Ferguson, and he's like he's based his whole career on being anti-Trump, and he's passing. He's one of these guys who's aggressively seeking to pass laws against so-called hate speech and everything else. And he's still.
He's also very much pro-death in terms of doctors killing people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, he's just think of the worst sort of litany of progressive hard left ideas. That's him. Yeah,
When Wheeler ran for re-election in 2020, I suppose, I feel stupid for having been shocked because his two major opponents were far crazier than he was.
yeah, yeah.
Teresa Rayford and Sarah Iannarone. And
Yes,
again, we were talking about NGOs. She's the executive director of the Street Trust,
yes,
whatever the hell that is. And where does it get its money from? She
yeah,
describes herself as a strategic leader, urban policy transformer, and grassroots movement
yeah.
builder. Um, I don't see a job description there,
Ayanna
actually.
Roney was the one who famously wore a skirt, like Chairman Mao skirt or something, right? So she just like, she's not socialist, communist. Yeah, and the other one,
It's like Obama. Oh yeah, well, he was a community activist. Again, that's not really a job description,
yeah,
is it? Well, I know what it means. It means that you get money from governments and from big business to wreck things
yeah, yeah.
and to
You're
pay and to give gangsters money.
you're kind of a conduit for money laundering, or
Yeah.
it's like steam control. Like I think that's the old bonfire of the vanity books.
Yeah, Tom Wolfe described the whole deal, the scam, in his essay "Mau Mauing the Flatcatchers," which was about San Francisco in the '60s.
Yeah,
Let's bring the let's bring the gang leaders in. Let's make them
right.
part of the solution.
Yeah, let's tap into their wisdom. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And basically, they're paying people like Obama's groups, like Sarah Ann Aron's group. They're paying people to keep them, to mollify them, to keep them off the streets. And in 2020 in Portland and Seattle, we saw that no, you pay them, and actually that gets them on the streets. Of course, I was talking about USAID earlier and what it does abroad. Well, 2020 was really largely financed probably by our own governments, state and federal governments. I mean, that was tax dollars finding its way into local pockets in Portland. Because, it was really striking how once Biden won, it all just evaporated. And I know the genuine radicals on the street, the foot soldiers, who aren't necessarily in on the whole scam, who think it's all for real. None of them were Joe Biden supporters. None of them liked Joe Biden. They're like the old '60s radicals. They kind of hate the liberals more than they hate the right wingers, because the liberals are seen as this, as more of a threat, right? The liberals might win and mollify what they want is for everybody, the broader masses, to be just as angry as they are and follow them into this glorious revolution. And liberals might come along and throw the masses a bone, and the great revolution will never happen.
Well, you saw these recent protests. We got Ayanna Pressley, we got Maxine Waters, we have Elizabeth Warren, and you got some black. Was it Hakeem Jeffries who was talking about physical violence,
Yeah.
or that crazy woman who's actually kind of delightful in the sense that she's completely demented, Jasmine Crockett from Texas.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He said, "We're gonna put you on your asses." She actually said that, and
Really?
like who? And you see, even Kara Swisher of all people was laughing about this on CNN because nobody showed up. And you know why nobody showed up? Because they weren't being paid to show
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
anymore.
And that's why what's happening. I remain very skeptical of Trump, but what's happening right now with Doge, and I'm really skeptical of Musk, but still, what's happening with them going after USAID and other things is, it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. Finally, that something might actually happen.
Do you
I
know what
think.
people are saying about, the Crystallites are saying that, oh, why isn't anyone just expressing disgust at Elon Musk when he's up to 13 children now with how God knows how many women, and there may be more, there may be up to 100 through IVF. And oh, family values. Oh, you're the family values party. How did family values work for the Republicans? Huh? When it turns out like Bob Dole, Mr. Family Values, didn't you dump the woman, the nurse you married, who pretty much reconstructed you as a person for Liddy Dole? Huh? A younger model? Didn't you do that? Newt Gingrich, all of these people, and all these David David A. French evangelical types expressing, oh, horror at Trump and Elon Musk. Yeah, let's look at the evangelical leaders. My understanding of Christian theology with regard to marriage is absent death, it's one wife to a customer. You've had more than one wife. Well, what's going on there? The adoption of the family values thing was just so stupid because it's like Gary Hart. Yeah, why don't you just, come on, follow me, see what I do. Yeah, and they followed him and they saw what he was doing. And golly, who's that very attractive woman with the stunning figure out there on your yacht, right? What was her name? Donna something or other?
Yeah.
And all of
Oh,
and
yeah, she was great.
conservatism. Conservatism is a busted flush. Conservatism should have been wrapped up in 1991 when the Soviet Union was dissolved. It's just a grift. It has no it has no political support anymore. None. I mean, neoconservatism was always just a few dozen or a few hundred people working for think tanks, people with newspaper columns and the like. No on the ground political support at all.
Yeah.
And Trump never campaigned as a conservative. And so to have these conservatives, try to take credit for his victory. Oh, weren't you part of the National Review cover story the never Trump won? Hmm? They had nothing to do with it because Trump decided, quite rightly, that people are sick of this. What Oscar Wilde called, hanging your clean laundry in public. Oh, look at my wife and look at my children, and I'm going to use them as political props. And then, oh, I see, after the election, it turns out that you and your wife are splitting, and we ask for privacy at this time. And oh, okay, so it was all a sham, was it? I don't, what I said when Trump was running in 2016. He's running for president of the United States, not Pontifex Maximus. Okay, and you really want to get into
Yeah.
the sex lives of previous presidents? Huh? I don't think you do.
Well, and remember what it yielded in 2000, this nonsense about family values. It was George W. Bush campaigning on basically the fact that Bill Clinton's a creep who cheated on his wife. And, vote for me, right? It was the slogan, was something about, bring values back to the office or some nonsense. And we got the disaster of George W. Bush.
Well, no, and also this phony, this fake sort of hardiness. Who would you rather have a beer with,
Yeah.
George W. or Al Gore? Well, I guess I don't have much choice in the matter. I'd rather have a beer with Al Gore because W doesn't drink.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, what a silly, this is one of the reasons why Trump resonates with so many Americans is he's not a phony. He doesn't pretend to be anything other than he is. I like big, loud, shiny,
Yeah.
expensive things. And yeah, I had three wives. Well, I suppose if you had my advantages, you'd probably have
Yeah.
more.
They're all
Okay.
hot too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's funny, he is the guy you might want to have a beer with, but he doesn't sell it, I guess. He always wears a suit and tie. He seems to shy away from, that silly thing in American politics where let me go to the county fair and eat corn dogs and show everybody I'm
Yeah.
a regular guy.
The business suit, I said years ago that, Don Draper was the precursor for Donald Trump.
Yeah,
This handsome man, well dressed, and the ladies love him and all this, and he's not really shy about it, you
yeah,
know, and he's really kind of antediluvian in so many of his attitudes. And I think that Don Draper greased the skids for Donald Trump. He wears a sober business suit. When I see, and Justin Trudeau didn't invent this, but there's Justin Trudeau. He's standing at a podium and he's not wearing a jacket. And maybe he's wearing a tie, but it's very much loosened. And he's got his sleeves rolled up. And I think, who do you think you're kidding here? So after you've finished giving this address, are you going to do something manly like chop
yeah.
firewood
I
or
was gonna
change a
say that.
tire?
Yeah, you're gonna go
No, it's
fix the
not.
washer.
I mean, it is such a powerful signifier. Trump in his business suit. I mean business, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's refreshing that his ego is out front. You know what I mean? Uh, all these other guys want you to think, that they're humble, and above all, they're doing it because they want to do good. And Trump is like, yeah, well, I'm an ambitious guy, and I like running things, and this is kind of fun. being an alpha male is a blast, you know.
You know what would be fun? Would be fun if I were a big baseball fan and a bunch of my father's friends or associates came to me and said, "How would you like to own a Major League Baseball
Yeah,
team?"
yeah,
Yeah, of course I would, but why are you tormenting me like this? I don't
yeah,
have that kind of money. We'll front you the money. What are you talking about? We'll front you the money. Okay.
yeah.
So you can be the managing general partner of the Texas Rangers. And I think, yeah, this is where I want to be. And they've got a weak governor system in Texas, right? I don't think very many people understand this.
Right,
His accomplishments, well, the governor of Texas doesn't have that much power, right? And we're supposed to
right.
believe that, oh, I mean, I believe it was Steve Saylor might have said that, or other people noticed that it would seem likely that after George Bush graduated from college, he has never read a book in his life
Yeah,
since then. Oh, but we're supposed to believe he's reading these neocon texts or whatever, or some book by Natan Sharansky or something like that.
yeah.
No, that is not going to happen. Are you kidding me?
As if it would be a good thing in the first place, right? I mean, you should have some critical faculties. If you're kind of dumb and you read that, you just fall under the sway. You're like a 15-year-old kid who reads Ayn Rand, and now he's hardcore libertarian. You need your some independence of intellect.
I
Uh,
don't know whether that's better or worse than David Cameron going on about how much he loves the Smiths, right?
oh God,
Or
yeah,
Barack Obama and his Spotify lists.
his
These have been
Spotify.
focus grouped to death. And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, Nick Drake? No, I'm sorry, you are not listening to Nick Drake.
yeah, no,
Okay, but we've got to get that sort of sensitive, arty
yeah,
type, on our side. And you just look, and I'm one for making lists myself and lists about music. I know that the list is phony because people who really love music and listen to a lot of music, if you ask them for lists,
it's
on
like
these lists, there will be what they call deep cuts or even WTF choices, right?
right.
Well, you must be the only person who loves this song from this album, right? There's none
Yeah.
of that on Obama's lists.
No, it belies its carefully contrived nature, right? It's like, I mean, Nick Drake is perfect, right? I mean, that's like the perfect posturing choice, right? This guy that is, critically is like untouchable, right? He has a
Yeah,
tragic story. He's been dead for a little while now, right?
he's
He's
been dead for
awesome.
50 years.
That's insane. I didn't even know that. I came to him late, a few years back. I thought he was contemporary, and I was shocked to learn out this guy's been dead for decades. Yeah,
Well, yeah, and another thing is that even with people, who were very much into, as they say, music, they get to a certain age in life, let's say 35 or something, the oldest, 40 typically.
yeah,
They've got a wife, they've got kids, they've got job responsibilities, and the prospect of listening to new music is
right.
agony to them,
Yeah,
right? Oh, but there's this music I already like. Can't I just listen to
yeah.
that for the rest of my life?
No, you don't have time. You don't. Yeah, and imagine that with rap, right? Imagine you're a 60-year-old man, Barack Obama, and you're supposed to be highly intelligent and cultured, and you're down with the latest Cardi B, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you really are, I think less of you, right? I mean, it looks better on you if I just assume you're lying than you actually are, chilling up with Cardi B.
No, it's just with David Cameron or the other politicians, they're dragged into this in Britain. It's just disgusting. Oh, how much do you love X football team, right? Oh, stop. Oh, just this is
Oh,
now
yeah,
mandatory, right?
yeah,
That Keir Starmer, oh, it's Arsenal, 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 right? But as far as this music, oh, what's on your Spotify list? And I thought, what a British politician should say, Henry Purcell, Edward Elgar, and Benjamin Britten for the gay
There you
vote.
go. Yeah, the best British classical artist you could come up with. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned Arsenal. I watched an interview. Piers Morgan interviewed Mearsheimer. I forget Mearsheimer's first name. The guy who wrote the book about the Israel lobby, and
Right.
he's just everywhere now criticizing, this foreign policy madness. So Piers Morgan is interviewing Mearsheimer, and he gets, the thorough drubbing that you would expect, by Mearsheimer. It was at the worst of the Gaza thing. When Gaza, they were just lighting it up, and uh, and then Piers ends the interview, and he's trying to be funny. He says, "It is ironic that we're talking about all this death and destruction." I'm paraphrasing, of course. And right now, my favorite football team, Arsenal United, is in the playoffs or whatever. And Mearsheimer, who's a serious dude, just gets this look like, oh my God, I knew he was an idiot, but this is just, yeah,
This isn't that old. I think this only goes back to the 80s, or it become de rigueur by the 90s. They use this word support. Which club do you support? They don't use the word fan, they use support, which
right,
sounds more invested, right?
yeah,
And it's just, I don't know. It just, you're down with the everyday Joe. Are you? No, you're
yeah,
not, because most of these people are maniacs who have wanted supreme power from the time they were about 14 years
yeah,
old.
yeah. And the idea that yeah, it's just, well, it's part of the whole, phony vulgarization, like you said with Trump, even though he is kind of a vulgar character. Uh, I don't see him engaging in this, right? I don't see him doing this. Yeah, I drink Bud out of the can, man. No, he's not going to do that. Uh,
Oh
and
no,
what?
we have this all the time. Like oh, Pete Buttigieg. I think he did this. Yeah, I'm just going to get together. My team has put together some ordinary Americans for me, and what am I going to do? I'm going to drink some cheap swill out of a bottle, right? Because
Yeah,
since the Belgians bought Anheuser-Busch, and I know it's called InBev now, and it's run out of Brazil. All of their beers are rubbish now,
really?
absolute rubbish.
I didn't
But
know.
no, got to no.
Yeah,
I don't want to. Even I don't want to drink one of those craft beer. I don't want people to think I'm a craft beer kind of buy. How about something like Rolling Rock? I don't know. That's kind of on the edge there, and that might just be pushing it a little too hard. I mean, if you're not from where's Rolling Rock come from? Pennsylvania?
I'm thinking Midwest, Great Lakes region. I don't know, but yeah. But then there's the hipster element. Hipsters are drinking Rolling Rock, right? I'm
Yeah,
ironically drinking the cheap beer.
it's
Yeah,
not. Well, it's not. I don't remember when they started drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon and wearing Pabst Blue Ribbon, trucker
yeah.
hats, and Old Milwaukee.
And those are
Old
awful
Milwaukee
beers.
was a American beer you drank if you didn't have much money.
Right. We drank it
Okay,
as
yeah.
kids.
Rolling Rock is from Latrobe. That's where Arnold Palmer is from in Pennsylvania.
Rolling Rock is not bad. We used to buy it, cheap
Oh, dear.
beer.
It's owned by InBev Anheuser-Busch now. So no,
Great. Yeah.
no, the consolidation in the American beer industry. I mean, I grew up in Vancouver and watching American TV, and all of these brands like Olympia and Rainier and all the local Washington brands, they're all gone. They're all gone now
Yeah.
because it's not efficient to have, so many beer makers. And of course, nobody thought that there was anything bougie about drinking Olympia back in the 60s, 70s,
Yeah.
80s, whatever, right? It was just a local beer. But,
Right.
the craft beer people, they're appealing to a different type of person. I got nothing against craft beer at all, except for these India Pale Ales, these
They're
IPAs.
awful. Right. Yeah.
I just thought I'd heard so much about them for so many years. that about 5 years ago, there's a lot of liquor stores in BC. They don't sell the European half-liter cans that I like, but they do sell like dozens of craft beer. And so many
Right.
of them are IPAs. And so I thought, okay, well, let's give this a try. So I bought 3 or 4 different ones and I drank them. And I thought, you know what this tastes like? It tastes like cod liver oil, only hoppier.
Yeah, I will say this for the, well, you're talking about all these formerly local beers now owned by InBev or whatever. One thing about the craft beer, at least here, not here in Portland, I'm not in Portland anymore. In Portland, when I first went there, even though I've never been into drinking beer really, craft beers or anything, I
Henry
had it.
Weinhardt? Henry Weinhardt?
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
they're
that
gone
goes way
now. They're
back.
gone.
Are they gone? That's an
Yep.
Oregon beer too.
Yes, it is. And it was became popular in Vancouver amongst
Yeah.
a certain type of people who would identify themselves by the beer that they drank. Not that, not that swill that everyone else drinks.
I moved to Portland in 2013. I thought it was kind of cool that there are all these little craft beers that were locally made as part of this whole aesthetic that was lampooned on that show Portlandia.
Right.
There were all these hippies. Things hadn't gone terribly wrong, and these people would be definitely on the left to the extent they were political, but they weren't that political. It was kind of hippie-ish, but there was this whole craft sort of movement, and people were moving to Portland to do things just like that. I'm going to move to Portland, lease a little place, and make my own beers. Just the best beer I can make and sell it locally. I don't want to get filthy rich. I'm just going to try to make that work. Or I'm going to go to Portland. I've got an idea for a new kind of bike shop. And all this stuff that's easily made fun of. But, when you compare it against everything else, it's kind of admirable. And it's kind of sad that it
I
didn't
remember
work out.
visiting I remember visiting Portland, and they had the Rose Festival every
Right.
year. And it was during the Rose Festival, and I thought this place is really kind of a paradise.
Yeah.
And one thing that struck me was, in some boulevard in Portland where they have these Rose Festival activities, you have people, large numbers of people, drinking beer in public, and there's no trouble.
Yeah.
Anglo-Saxon people are not good about drinking beer in public. They're not. It always ends in tears. I mean, the Germans can do it, right?
Right.
But no, it ends in tears, and everything was just so chill, as they say. But you see, I mean, obviously there's 2 Portlands. There's up in the hills, down by the Willamette River. That's a very different kind of Portland.
Yeah.
Very different. Down in the
Yeah.
flats.
They managed to ruin it, and I guess we can blame Trump. He didn't do it, but the reaction to Trump, the radicalization that took place nationwide, hit Portland hard because it really was. It was this kind of idyllic place, and it was 3 or 4 years I lived there before the shit hit the fan. Excuse me, in 2016. But with the radicalization, probably with a lot of money getting spent on it deliberately to encourage these anti-Trump protests and stuff.
But you saw the mug shots of these people, and it just hit me so hard. I thought, half of these people seem to be trans, and they're all obviously deranged, these people.
Yeah, my
All
mugshot
deranged.
was in there with them.
Yeah, I remember.
I probably looked pretty deranged too, but yeah. It's funny too, and I see those pictures, and I can always pick out 1 or 2 people that I've seen around, or I might actually know. But yeah, not only do they look weird. I mean, you look at them and you try to factor out, okay, if they dressed normally, if they didn't wear their hair strange, if they didn't put on, you know what I mean? If they were just a normal person, well-fed, about half of them would look normal. But about half of them look like, no, these are genuine freaks like odd shaped heads, right? And slack jaws. And I mean, I'm about to go phlebotomist. And,
Oh well, oh, but so many of them, it's like, okay, you have a man, okay, and he's grown his hair out, right? And he's dyed it pink or parts of it pink, so he's
yeah,
trans. And I'm thinking, you look like the kind of, and the expression in their eyes and
yes,
wounds on the face. There's this new fad which is kind of displaced cutting, where you stab yourself in the face.
really?
Do you know about this?
No.
It's very popular amongst women now. And I look at these, and it's like you look the kind of person that I would literally cross the street to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 10 minutes out of, my day. It's worth it. I don't want to take the chance
not
that you're
not
going to
worth the
start
risk.
screaming incomprehensibly at me, and when I don't react the right way, you're going to try and kill me.
Yes. And what happened in Portland, what happens in these places is that normal, relatively normal people, people who actually hold jobs and stuff, start to adopt these appearances, right? I mean, you go into a coffee shop in Portland, the barista might look pretty fucking scary, right? I mean, a lot of these people. So what happened in Portland was it became that you could not tell the freaks from the just marginal people or even somewhat normal people. You know, there are people who I would see on the streets and I would think maybe that person's homeless. Now, normally, anywhere there's a clear distinction between a person who's homeless. You can tell that person's homeless, that person's not. But in Portland, there are people who are actually, maybe they're not homeless and they just look that way.
Well, I had this problem in Victoria because for reasons I won't get into, I lived in a hotel in downtown Victoria for almost 4 years. Okay. And Victoria is one of those cities that decided that we love the unhoused, they call them, right? And
Yeah,
we're going to give them all this stuff. And we're going to take over hotels and motels and turn them into places for the unhoused without telling anybody what we're doing, right?
yeah,
And I lived right near the epicenter of this. So I walked down to Douglas Street, which is Victoria's most busy streets. Every time I reached the sidewalk, I had to do a threat assessment of everyone that I saw. And it's much more difficult than it used to be. Okay, if you see someone wearing a suit, that person's not a threat. No one wearing a suit is a threat. Okay. But maybe they prefer to dress a little casually. Now, in the old days, hard shoes. If someone was wearing hard shoes, this person's not a threat. No one under the age of 50 or 60 wears hard shoes
right.
anymore. Let's say, are you clean shaven? I don't mean people with beards, but I mean you've got that look where you go 3, 4, 5 days without shaving. Hunter Thompson, in his book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I remember this memorable phrase. He referred to showing up at the Mint Hotel in Las Vegas with unshaven, standard wino trim, he called it. Standard wino trim is common amongst wealthy people now,
right.
right? Also, used to be, there'd be a man with a woman. Okay, you think, okay, they're not a threat because some man with a woman is not going to get into with someone else. That no longer
Right.
holds true. Head coverings. Beanies or toques, as they're called in Canada. You see wealthy people, seriously wealthy people wearing these things now.
Yeah.
So it is, it's been my experience, and it was very important to my survival when I was living there that I learned to distinguish who was a possible threat and who wasn't. Well, also, I remember when I moved back to Vancouver from Edmonton in 1997, I was walking down Granville Street, which is the main drag downtown. And this is the first time that I'd seen it. I saw a woman on Granville Street talking to herself. And I looked at her and I thought, okay, this is a good looking young woman and she seems to be well dressed. Oh my God, everyone is crazy in Vancouver. Now, she was a Bluetooth early adopter, right?
Right.
And of course, it used to be a sure giveaway that if you saw someone talking, particularly in an animated way, to themselves, stay away from that person. That person is dangerous. Now, people are doing it, you know, and it's ubiquitous. So, just to wrap up, it is much harder to avoid the crazies than it used to be.
Yeah, yeah, because everybody's blending in. And I realize the thing about these wealthy people or upper middle class people wearing beanies and dressing down, uh, it's almost like an encroachment. It's like a form of greed. It's like,
It's cultural appropriation, is
yes,
what it is. I mean, look at the one of the most iconic pictures of the 20th century is trying to I feel bad that I don't remember the name of the photographer. Her name was Roberta something. The first Ramones album. They're standing in front of a brick wall, right?
right,
And they're in their jeans and their jeans are torn and it's a signifier. And what it signifies is we are poor. Okay. And now you see Kim Kardashian and all these idiots who are spending three, four, $500 for jeans which are pre-ripped, horribly, like shredded, right? And I know Jim Kunstler goes on about this. Have there ever been an upper class in the history of the world that has dressed so badly? Not just so
right.
badly, but oh, we're just like you.
Yeah,
No, you are not just like us. Because if
yeah,
I had their kind of money, I would be swayed at all times, with the clothes of designers whose names ended in a vowel. All right.
yeah.
I
And
mean,
it's
it's
like,
also it's like casual clothes. When I worked at a radio station in San Diego, oh, a big treat for you, peons, Casual Friday.
yeah,
And I just used to wear like a sports jacket and tie and slacks. And why didn't you? We're giving you Casual Friday. And
yeah,
good looking casual clothes are expensive. Okay. And
right,
I didn't have the money for good looking casual clothes. You buy your casual clothes from Walmart or Target or whatever, and you look bad. Okay.
right.
You look bad. So I don't want to do that. It was Roberta Bailey was the photographer of the Ramones cover.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I never thought of it, but this idea of casual Friday, so what does it introduce? It introduces hierarchy where before you just wore acceptable suit and tie to the office. It's uniform, you know? It's like everybody's in a uniform and there's no competition. It must be terrible for the women, for one thing, right? So now all of a sudden you have to compete on a couple of fronts. Your clothes have to look like they cost a little something. Plus, you also have to display a certain amount of taste, and even further, it's harder to look good, right? Now your body's on display, maybe, or you know what I mean. Now you have to worry about your physique, or whereas before, everybody has a coat and tie on, and you're all kind of looking the same, and there's
It's
something to be.
battle armor. I
Yeah,
mean, in the States, you go to the Men's Warehouse or what's it called, K&G Superstores, and that's the same company that owns Moore's, which is a clothing chain in Canada. You get a suit and it doesn't cost much money, right?
right.
But no, you have to make Fridays into a status competition,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Oh, wow, that sports shirt you're wearing, it really sets off your cashmere sweater, you know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no thanks.
No, I really can't. I find this absolutely unbearable that, no, they have to colonize a culture which
Yeah,
is not their culture. What's the saying? We are not, our culture is not a costume.
right.
Well, apparently proletarian culture
Yeah.
is a costume now. That's what
Apparently
it's been reduced to.
my class is. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get to pretend like you're a working man and you work with your hands and yeah. You know, somebody
No,
hates
it's too much, and they should not be allowed to get away with this. But, you know, when the financial crisis, when the world nearly came to an end in 2008, I've been following celebrity culture closely for about a decade. And I just saw it getting out of hand, more and more out of hand. The hubris of these people, waving their wealth, shoving it down our throats. And after 2008, I thought there's going to be a pullback because these people are going to start to be worried. They're
right.
going to, if they keep carrying on the way they have been, they're going to be worried about being hunted down in the
Right.
streets. But no, I didn't learn my lesson from history. The lesson is the trend, if it's a bad trend, it goes farther and
Yeah.
farther and farther until
Yeah.
a total collapse or, total reaction.
Yeah.
Thermidor.
Yeah, things have to get worse, apparently, than 2008. They're going to have to get really bad before the wealthy start feeling any shame. I'm struck by the difference between white and black celebrities, though, right? When you think about rappers and how their whole identities are about how much wealth they have, right? This insanely vulgar display of wealth.
Oh, we drink Hennessy.
Yeah.
Anyone can drink Hennessy. It's not that expensive.
Well, yeah, well, it's funny what they think
Yeah.
is, yeah, Cadillacs. It'll last people driving Cadillacs and thinking they're the elite for driving a freaking Cadillac. But yeah, I guess there's something to be said for the honesty of the black folk.
Well, Kendrick Lamar or Lamar Kendrick, whatever his name is,
Kendrick Lamar.
Pulitzer Prize winner, the fellow who pimps
Really?
butterflies.
Oh God.
A Pulitzer Prize winner. Yeah.
My God.
And so he does a Super Bowl routine and he comes out wearing a kind of sports jacket, right? And he's on top of a car and really cruel comments on social media. I had no idea he was 3'6" tall. This
Yeah.
sort of thing, right?
Yeah, this ferocious guy. Yeah, he's a midget apparently.
Yeah, he's a midget, and apparently the Super Bowl is hosting a diss war between him
And Drake.
and Drake,
Your own
in which he
Canadian.
is calling Drake a pedophile, a certified pedophile. And I thought, this is insanely actionable. Insanely, especially that word certified. Okay, Kendrick Lamar has no idea what the word certified means.
No.
Okay. But, never mind that. I mean, I can't see how this doesn't end up like in hundreds of millions of dollars in damages.
I believe Drake is actually suing him right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
And he's
he
being
is.
ridiculed because all the rapping community thinks, the proper thing to do is go shoot him on the street, apparently,
Well, they've kind of moved beyond that, haven't they?
Have they? I don't know.
Well, yeah, it just this fellow Orthodox Christian Unwoke Duffy on X, he put together a selection of some of Kendrick Lamar's Pulitzer Prize winning lyrics.
Oh my God.
And it's just the same. It's just the same as you might imagine, right? I had that hoe before you had that hoe, and we be drinking Hennessy and all of this stuff. It's embarrassing. It's just absolutely. You would think that.
Yeah.
I mean, hip hop is 40 years old, coming up to 40 years old, and you'd think there would be a development, because if you look at rock music lyrics, I'm not talking about Neil Diamond and Carole King and that Brill Brothers stuff, which was written to great American standards, right? But rock music, let's start with Louie Louie, right? And then you see the lyrics developing, becoming more sophisticated, right? With rap
Right.
music, no. Okay, so Kendrick Lamar brought out a single last year called Euphoria. And here's the cover: Euphoria, noun. Symptoms, oh, and how it's pronounced. And a feeling of well being, a relation, elation, and two examples. And I'm thinking, you're the Pulitzer Prize winner. Going down the Webster's Dictionary defines that's kind of hacky for a Pulitzer Prize winner, isn't it?
To admit, I don't know any of his songs. I've been following him. I mean, not following him. I've known about him for like 5 or 6 years, and apparently he's the biggest. He's supposed to be the greatest rapper now, right?
Yeah.
Among the cognoscenti, such as it is, of rap. These are the people, the critics say he's great. But I think the story is that he came out with an album some years back, like 5 or 6 years ago, that was light, right? And it was like, it wasn't angry at all.
Mm.
And he got overwhelmed by this criticism. Everybody jumped on him saying, "You're a sellout, Uncle Tom, because your music is not angry and not talking about blackety black, this and that." So the next album he produced was super angry black man album, right? And it was all about how much he hates Whitey, and recovery achieved, and he's off into the stratosphere.
Yeah. I don't know that this is, the same thing happened to, Whitney Houston in reverse. I've been
Yeah,
reading about Clive Davis. You know who he is?
yeah, the producer. Yeah,
I just why he was forced out of Columbia Records was just because corruption, out and out corruption, theft, okay? And also company money being used to buy prostitutes, female and male, drugs of all kinds, pay off to DJs and people who work for the music press, right? And it's just the attitude was, oh no, you can't attack Clive Davis. And his boss said that this is not, basically, he said, this is not right. And it brought people compared it to the indecent exposure book. You know about that?
no,
Okay, so this was a Wall Street Journal reporter. He wrote this book, Indecent Exposure. This amazing case, it was Columbia Pictures, not related, okay, that David Begelman had stolen all of this money and he'd laundered it in the books said that Cliff Robertson, to give one example, a well-known actor, had received money. And so this showed up like he had to pay taxes for it, right? He said, I haven't worked for Columbia Pictures in the last year, right?
right.
And then it turned out that Begelman was writing all these fake checks and taking, the money. And what happened was, this is absolutely incredible that he was sacked. Some a man, a man called Hirsch, who actually had morals at Columbia, said he has to go. And David Begelman was fired. And then, like, the industry turned on Hirsch. Oh no, you've been so
Interesting.
mean to David Begelman. This was famously, parodied on SCTV. With one of these corporate sleazeballs saying to, John Candy, dressed as, corporate sleazeball. Yeah. Well, what about that hooker that you killed? Well, come on. She gave me no choice. You see, she gave him no choice.
Yeah.
And just incredible that the industry turned on the honest man at the company and forced him out. Alan Hirschfield was the good guy here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the music biz when it was properly seedy, I guess.
Well, it's still
Well,
properly seedy now because, well, a couple of things. Oh, you think all of these people, these little starlets, write their own songs? They don't write
Yeah.
their own songs. They got nothing to do with their songs. What they do is they pay people, and I could name some names, but I won't, who agree to give someone a partial writing credit in exchange for cash.
Yeah.
Okay. And apparently, and they will offer things, they will offer themselves up, okay, to songwriters. Okay. But the other thing is the sales figures can't be trusted. Um, it was thought with SoundScan, with Nielsen SoundScan, that we actually knew, how many records were selling. But now this has been gamed. Yeah,
Right.
it's been gamed, and well, I don't know, things like Taylor Swift bringing out dozens of different versions of
Yeah.
one album. Come on, to keep other people from the number one slot. What's
Yeah.
world we live in? I mean, I suppose I'm a boomer, and this is an inevitable comparison I'll make. There were very few people alive, let's say, in the Western world in the 1960s who didn't know who the Beatles were. Okay. Who hadn't, heard Beatles songs or just, articles about them or whatever. Taylor Swift is a phenomenon. Like, there's no depth to it at all.
Yeah.
None. And I was shocked recently that Katy Perry, I, I, I have no love for her music, but I always thought she's a good looking woman. You know,
Yeah.
she's got the black hair and the pale skin and a good figure. She's not starved. Okay. Of course,
Right.
then she has to become a blonde like all the rest of them. Her latest album, which was controversial because she was working with a producer, Danish producer or something, who was accused of something by Kesha. I won't go into that. But anyway,
Kesha.
3 weeks in the Billboard Top 200. 3 weeks, which tells me she has no organic fan base.
Yeah.
None. And for years now, for a couple of decades, the albums, whatever you want to call them, CDs. I mean, they count up the tracks and album equivalent or whatever. They're like souvenirs, right?
Right.
You go to a concert, you buy a program, right? You go to a football game, you buy a program. It's a souvenir of the event, and the music they make are just souvenirs of their personality. Katy Perry, she's been a celebrity judge and done these other things, right? But it's obviously not her music that was in any way intrinsic to her success. And the same thing about Taylor Swift. I've been pushing this hypothesis about Taylor Swift and her astonishing popularity with a large subset of adolescent or pre-adolescent girls. And the reason is this. I mean, she's a serial dater, right?
Yeah.
How many men has she been linked to? She has no children. She's never been married. But the most important thing is that there's nothing carnal about her,
Right.
that one can't imagine her doing anything icky with a
Yeah.
man.
That's interesting. As I always wondered why it is that she seems there's nothing to me. I mean, she's very nice looking. I mean, technically, I don't see anything wrong when I examine her, but to me, she inspires no carnal thought whatsoever. I mean, there's just nothing
Well, I
about
mean,
this.
she's worked on that. I mean, she has a slight frame, okay, a very slight frame. And of course, it's unusual, highly unusual for a woman with a slight frame to have large breasts, to have breasts bigger than a B cup, say,
Right.
or a C cup maximum. Well, she's had several breast augmentations. She's also had other work done on her face, but everyone does that now. There's this phenomenon which is astonishing to me, where people are asked, some woman, some pop starlet or some celebutard in her 20s, how old does this woman look? And they typically give her ages about 5 to 10 years more than it actually is, and it's a result of plastic surgery. That all of these women are having plastic surgery done in their 20s.
Yeah. No, you'll see them now. And I was struck by this one girl I saw who she was younger. I mean, the woman wasn't yet 30, and she was nice looking, but it was clear she had had the lip thing done, the augmentation. And so she had developed this, the fake look, which is kind of unappealing in itself, right? Yeah, I'm wondering, okay, what the hell is going on here? I mean, you were probably very good looking before, and now, okay, you've got fuller lips, but they're clearly fake. So, well,
Well, there's a the actress Anna Taylor Joy.
no.
Well, you've seen her in some things. Okay, she was the star of The Witch.
Oh,
You
yeah,
seen The Witch?
of course.
Okay, and like she's a big star, right? Now she's kind of odd looking in that this is now a trend that her eyes are very far apart, right? But I found out that she's had this increasingly popular form of plastic surgery called buccal fat extraction.
Oh my God.
Okay. Now, when someone has full cheeks,
Yeah.
this is buccal, called the buccal fat pad, okay, which is on either side of your cheeks. And she had this removed. And all of these people, let's see, Bella Hadid, Leah Michelle, Khloe Kardashian, they're all like basically having the inside of their cheeks scraped out. And it's a considerable amount of body tissue. And I mean, nobody wants to look natural at all anymore. And of course, the idea of Brazilian butt lift,
Oh
which
my
I
God.
understand that kills a fair amount of people because it costs a lot of money. So people are going like to discount. They're going to
Yeah.
Mexico and it's. I have to be a little bit crude here, but when you see Kim Kardashian and so many of the others with the outfits they wear, not just the lingerie or the bathing suits, where you have the strap between the buttocks. It's like, let's focus attention on the anus. And no,
Yeah.
let's not. Okay, let's not.
Well, there's a Canadian politician by the name of Ruby Dalla.
Yes.
And here, I'll put it up on the screen. She is the fakest looking person I've ever seen. Let me put it up here. I was going to ask you about it. Where is she? There she is. The politician who aspires to be the next prime minister
Oh no, she doesn't.
of
Who
Canada.
knows what? Who knows why she's running? She doesn't have a hope. She's not even. She's a
Yeah.
Sikh, and she's not going to get the Sikh votes because they've already been let's say acquired by
Yeah.
Mark Carney. I mean, this looks like AI.
Yeah.
This is so touched up that we're almost in uncanny valley
Right.
territory.
Yeah.
She's been out of politics like for a decade, and one of the reasons that she left politics was scandal about her, where she was accused of treating people who worked for her pretty much like slaves. Okay.
Yeah, that seems to be a thing with people from the subcontinent and
Yes.
Asia.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And I cannot understand why this woman is running. You have to put up a substantial amount of money to give to the party for these various stages. And even if she managed, I don't know, what is a total, 300 or $500,000, something like that. But if you run a campaign, campaigns are very expensive, and it's very embarrassing for these. If you win, it's not a problem. If you win, everyone wants to give you money. If you lose, these people will typically spend years paying off this
Right.
campaign debt, right? And in some cases, they've just got to fold it up, declare bankruptcy or whatever, because they're never going to. What, you want money from me? What for? I ran a campaign. You did? Really?
Well, I
Well, you
wonder
were a
what.
supporter. No, no, I was never a supporter of yours. What are you talking about? You want money from me? No.
Well, I don't think there was ever any resolution of the Kamala Harris thing where, they ended up in the red by 20 million or so,
30
right?
million supposedly.
Yeah. And they actually raised more than Trump. And it costs $1 billion more or less to be president, to run for president now. To seriously run for president of the U.S., it costs about $1 billion.
Well, when you look at Oprah saying, "I never received any money." Oh, Oprah, or sorry, Harpo Productions did.
Yeah,
Who owns that? Well, that would be you. And then, well, I had to put on an interview. Yeah, how these couches that you were buying, were they like $100,000 couches? You know?
yeah. Well, somebody has suggested that remember when it used to be a thing when we would talk about the $100,000 ashtrays that the Pentagon is spending money on, right? All these insane
Right.
amounts that they would spend on stuff. And people said, yeah, that's really just money laundering. The money's actually going into the black budget, right? And they're pretending to spend all this money on various things. And that could be a thing with politics now, you know. This,
Well, no, and just being humiliated by Beyonce, right? Now, supposedly Beyonce got paid an enormous sum of money, and the idea was she was going to sing her song with Freedom. Is that Beyonce's
I don't
song?
know. I don't
Okay,
remember.
anyway. And so there was Beyonce was going to be on the stage belting out this song, and Kamala Harris was going to come out, right?
Yeah,
So Beyonce says, yeah, I'll show up at your rally, but I'm not going to sing.
yeah,
Oh, she's such a great supporter of Kamala Harris. In the old days, not that long ago, celebrities would do this stuff for free.
yeah,
Well, I really want politician X, so I'll go up there and do a couple of numbers, right?
yeah. No, why does Beyonce need the money? I mean, my God, like Jay-Z apparently is the first billionaire rapper. Those people are obscenely wealthy.
Well,
Why does
you
she
can
need?
never be too rich or too
I guess
thin.
so.
That's what the
Yeah.
Duchess of Windsor said.
Well, you were talking earlier about all the fake success of the fake record sales and whatnot of these celebrities, and for some reason, Beyonce was picked out of the pack early on. I guess maybe she's that good by their standards. I'll fully admit I don't know I'm alien to the whatever criteria makes them successful now, but I don't know why Beyonce. I mean, I can understand Taylor Swift's success. She might be awful, but for the reasons you pointed out, the subject matter, her sort of asexual nature appeals to prepubescent girls who aren't really ready for that extreme sexuality. But Beyonce, for some reason, right, they picked her out and they decided we're going to make her the queen of pop music, and we're going to make her worshipped.
Well, no, it used to be that you could, if a song was popular, you'd get cover versions, right? The song "A Whiter Shade of Pale." How many cover versions do you
Are
think
there
there
a
are of that
bunch out
song?
there? I can't
What?
think of any.
A
Are
Whiter
there?
Shade of Pale?
Really?
Well, there's a very famous one. King Curtis, the great saxophonist, who was murdered in one of the stupidest, rock and roll deaths ever. He had a place in Harlem, and there was some guy shooting up in front of his front door, and hey, I work hard, for this place, and to get lost, and the guy murdered him, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess back in those days, Harlem was 1970, I think, so when he was murdered. It's still a fairly decent place. They don't want to live in the hood anymore.
Yeah.
Too dangerous, right? You want to live amongst white people. You're
Yeah.
not liable the chances of you being, stabbed to death by a junkie, it's not
Yeah.
not not too bad, right? But A Whiter Shade of Pale, King Curtis did a cover. He was the Aretha Franklin's band when she did the Fillmore concerts, which were released as a live album, which brought her to live audiences. And so King Curtis opened, and you can hear him playing Whiter Shade of Pale in the movie with Noel and I. But there are over 1,000 known cover versions of A Whiter Shade of Pale.
Wow.
Who is covering
I had no idea.
Beyonce songs? Okay.
Yeah,
Are these
nobody.
songs, I mean, so they buy the records, but are these songs that people are still playing? Do people hum these songs? They can't get them
No.
out of their heads. You know, it's like Hamilton. Remember what a huge success Hamilton
Yeah.
was? Have you ever heard a single Hamilton song?
No.
Have you? Can you name any of the Hamilton songs? Because, you
No.
know, it used to be that musicals, you know, classic musicals, My Fair Lady, and you could list so many, they would have hit tunes in them. Hair,
Exactly.
which came out in 1968, the first hippie musical
Yeah.
success. There were 5 top 5 hits, you know,
Right.
from Hair. And
Yeah.
Hamilton, no, Hamilton is like, yeah, Hamilton was black. No, Hamilton was not black. This was a slur invented by John Adams, right? And it was, yeah, the founding fathers were black. Are you insane? But they seem to a lot of black people seem to have memed this into existence. Oh, lost you. Okay, I guess I will wrap this up.
Oh, Kevin, where'd you go? No. This camera drops out occasionally. I am so sorry. So Kevin vanished. All right. Well, we did a good 2.5 hours. I guess that's enough. If you want to come back, Kevin, come back. No, Hamilton. The thing about Hamilton was it was surprising how quickly it disappeared because if you remember, Hamilton was a sensation right before things got ugly with the George Floyd summer. And I think when BLM and George Floyd hit hard in 2020, there was no room left for Hamilton. Hamilton rather quickly became gauche in their eyes, right? I mean, it's too conciliatory. You know, they don't want Hamilton anymore. They don't want Hamilton to be black anymore. They want them all to just to be evil white slave owners at this point. Well, anyway, that was Kevin. Let me see if I can find Kevin's Rumble because I wanted to post a link to that. Rumble. Going to Rumble. It's Rumble, right? All right. Oh, that's funny. It's Luke Ford that pops up with the. All right, so that's funny. You want to see what pops up when I search Kevin Grace on Rumble? This is funny. So when I search him on Rumble, it's me. It's the old place. There's Bumblebee. What was his name? Brundlefly. And there was that female. I forget her name. With the cougar avatar. Yeah. Anyway, let's find Kevin Grace. On Rumble. Channels. Let me go. There's a Kevin Grace channel. No channels found. Kevin Michael Grace. That's funny. Just everything you get is Luke Ford. I remember There's Me Again. I remember this. Transsexual person. Yeah, where is your channel, Kevin Grace? No channels found. KMG show. Thank you. That's good. KMG show. There it is. Follow. Let's get us a link to it. Is this it? I don't think this is it. This hasn't been active for a couple of years. Let's see if he's got a new KMG show up. The second version. Alrighty. Yeah, Rumble is pretty bumbling. Okay. One month ago, 2 months ago. All right, this looks pretty current. Yeah, there's something from a day ago. Okay, so I'll follow that. Here's the link to it. Okay, so I didn't even get to ask Kevin about the situation with YouTube. Apparently, he's kicked off of YouTube. Is that it? Look at this. He gets more views than me on Rumble than I can draw on frickin' YouTube. I guess I hate YouTube too. All right. So let's call it a day. It's been a good show. That was Kevin Grace. We'll be back next week when we got to find a guest. Help me find a guest. If you know anybody who might be relatively interesting, yeah. Share this tab. All right, here's that King Curtis version of Whiter Shade of Pale. All right, see you next week. God bless.
Thank